Is there anybody else who wants to say or ask anything?
I just wanted to ask the panel who they thought, in terms of modern literature, has sort of taken on the mantle of Orwell's quest for truth.
It's honestly first I think.
Well, you do, hope you, presumably.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of Orwell I always like most is the Orwell of Burma, who's kind of wrestling with the kind of the reality of being a policeman and sort of oppression. So in a way, I wonder if it's some of the people who we've never heard of, the people who are sort of anonymously writing from Iran or anonymously writing in places like North Korea, if they could, or in China, who are sort of trying to deal with living in a society that does restrain them. So I'm not sure if anyone who lives in a society as kind of relaxed and as free as ours can confront the sort of battles that Orwell was fighting in the same way that someone who's actually dealing with or in kind of confronting a repressive regime. So I have a sneaking suspicion it's perhaps somebody who's writing privately in a diary in Tehran somewhere, or writing sort of a blog in Tehran, or someone who's writing. There's a book, fantastic book, The Aquariums of Pyongyang, which is the story of someone who's sentenced to a labour camp, having been a party member in North Korea, and what he goes through before he escapes to South Korea and tries to make a story there. And I think it's those kind of stories that are probably going to have the most to teach us.
This is a great question to finish on, so I'm just going to put it to
I think if we're looking in the UK, sadly I don't think there is anybody here that's doing that sort of thing in that way. But there are people in other countries. I mean, in Egypt, for example, Naguib Mahfouz is somebody who writes pretty much against the grain of society and questions sort of not just the Islamist groups that he finds around him, but also the regime through his literature, and it is through literature, which is exactly what Orwell did. But in the UK, I'm sad to say that I don't think there is anybody that I can see that comes close to what Orwell did, which is what's so special about Orwell.
Yeah, I just think that he is that his shadow remains a shadow over everyone. There is no one who, but when you read people like Timothy Garton Ash, who obviously sort of was fascinated by communism and is obviously somebody influenced by Orwell too, you just see that influence. And so again, I don't really think there's anyone here. But I think if we talk about integrity, I think a writer who's actually known as a novelist, but her journalism has incredible integrity, is A.L. Kennedy, and I think she's a very interesting political writer who's got that very sort of searing intelligence. And then in something I've been reading recently, the Israeli writer David Grossman, who in Israel more and more is a society where the orthodoxy has taken hold, and there is only one way of thinking, and it's become very much in Israel that where, you know, whatever the threat from Hamas, there is a demonisation of the Palestinians that's become greater and more acute, and Israel's moved more and more to the right since in the last decade. And David Grossman, whose son was killed in the last war in Lebanon, very tragically, just published this book of essays recently which has that political clarity of Orwell, of exposing what the bunkum is, and writing with very searing intelligence of trying to expose what the truth is. So he would be my choice.
Can I as the chair, I'm not really allowed to say, but I'm going to anyway. I have to say, I think Will Self is I think probably the most outstanding living prose stylist. Anyway, and I think that he he's an English writer, and his type of writing, he also writes a lot of journalism. He politicises consciousness, I think, in a quite an interesting way. Christopher Hitchens, of course, in America. Well, he's like it or not, he's a great writer. I think his ideas have become loathsome, but it didn't used to be. And my personal favourite is Slavoj Žižek, who is a Slovenian intellectual. That sounds terribly grand, doesn't it? And he's fabulous in this relation, because he sees civilization itself as a form of totalitarianism, and indeed sees it. It's impossible to imagine a civilization without it having a kind of a total and force, in the sense that actually people have to believe in it as well. But at the same time as believing, they also disbelieve. So he actually uses it in a very amusing and ironic way totalitarian models to look at the apparently non-totalitarian model of liberal democracy. And Terry Eagleton, another great, more traditionally socialist writer.
Yeah, I disagree with all of this. I suspect whoever it is someone who the dunces are all in confederacy against. I kind of imagine that people like Will Self are the dunces that I imagine hating whoever is Orwell because they're sort of so full of themselves and so pleased with themselves all the time.
Well, okay. Christopher Hitchens, though, is a huge fan of George Orwell and is probably his greatest living.
He also in favour of the invasion of Iraq as well.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I know, it all went wrong. I think it's too much wine in this case. I think it's rotted his brain. I finally got it to his brain as well as his liver. Anyway, I mustn't slum people. So, that's free cut. Anyway, that's been, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've very much enjoyed that discussion and I thought it was very stimulating. So, thanks a lot, Pat. Hoping, Joe and Margit, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.